Today we are going to start on Dio Rivera's mural inside the Detroit Institute of Art. So if you open up your PowerPoint to slide number 30, you can see the exterior of the DIA, the Detroit Institute of Arts. And on a personal note, you all know that I'm from Michigan. You probably don't know that my mother is from Detroit, and all of my mother's uncles worked at, as is very common for many people growing up in Detroit, all of her uncles worked on the assembly lines. All of her uncles worked in some way, shape, or form associated with the automobile industry. And so growing up as a child on our family trips to Detroit, in which there were many, my favorite part, of course, was going to the DIA and seeing Dio Rivera's mural. So this mural holds kind of a special place for me in my heart because it's kind of, in many ways, the backdrop of my childhood and going to visit my family. And still today, on another kind of personal note, my parents only buy cars that are associated with that Michigan brand, either Ford, GM, or Chrysler. My parents will not be found, they will die before they buy anything that's not a Michigan brand related automobile. And this is true, this rings true for a lot of people growing up in Michigan. When the big three, as we know them affectionately, are the source of your bread and butter, are paying for your whole family's existence, there's no way you would ever buy a car that's not associated with the Michigan name. So Detroit, back to our slide. Detroit is this great Midwestern city, and I dare any of you to challenge me on that. And it is a city that really owes its wealth, it owes its greatness, even though that's, it's unfortunate what has happened to Detroit in the past few decades. But it owes its great wealth, and it owes this incredible art museum that it has, which rivals many of the other art museums in the world. Don't fight me on that either. The Detroit Institute of Arts is really a crown jewel in terms of the collection that it has. But it owes that richness to the automobile industry and to Henry Ford. And in the 19-teens, it was expected that New York by the 1930s would surpass the size of Chicago in terms of population, and that by the 1950s, if the population of Detroit continued at the rate that it was growing, was going to surpass the size of New York City as the kind of greatest, most populous city in the country. Unfortunately, in the 1930s, with the Great Depression, that doesn't quite come to fruition. And interestingly enough, Dio Rivera is painting this mural cycle showing the greatness of Detroit industry at the very time, in 1932, 1933, that greatness is collapsing. And so it is kind of historically fascinating to work to look at in light of those contradictions that are happening. Who is financing this work? Well, the son of Henry Ford, Edsel Ford, who becomes the chair of the Ford Foundation of the Ford industry, who has kind of a very strong rivalry with his father in terms of who is going to run the industry better, was not only this heir to the Ford fortune and the chair of the Ford plants, but also was a great aesthete. He was a great lover of art, a great collector of art. And it's due to him that the Detroit Institute of Arts has the collection that it has. So he was really the primary person responsible for paying Dio Rivera, promising him $10,000 in the middle of the Great Depression to come to paint about 100 square feet of mural in the courtyard, in this great courtyard that you'll see. And also the director of the Detroit Institute of Art at the time was a facilitator bringing Dio Rivera from San Francisco to Detroit at this time. So before we start, I want to give you kind of a look at what it seems like inside this garden court. So go to slide number 31. In slide number 31, you are facing the industry better. Was not only this heir to the Ford fortune and the chair of the Ford plants, but also was a great aesthete. He was a great lover of art, a great collector of art. And it's due to him that the Detroit Institute of Arts has the collection that it has. So he was really the primary person responsible for paying Dio Rivera, promising him $10,000 in the middle of the Great Depression to come to paint about 100 square feet of mural in the courtyard, in this great courtyard that you'll see. And also the director of the Detroit Institute of Art at the time was a facilitator bringing Dio Rivera from San Francisco to Detroit at this time. So before we start, I want to give you kind of a look at what it seems like inside this garden court. So go to slide number 31. In slide number 31, you are facing the western wall where that doorway is, that you're looking west. In slide number 32, you are looking east. In slide number 33, you're looking at the south wall. And if you jump down to slide number 36, you're looking at the north wall of the garden court. So let's go back and we'll start in the looking west. So as you know, Dio Rivera studies for years, spends about a decade or more in Europe looking at a lot of the art in Spain and France and Italy. And one of the common religious themes in fresco art is to paint on the western wall scenes of the final judgment or the last judgment. And Dio Rivera takes that idea and he runs with it in this mural cycle. So as you're looking west here, remember that we've talked about in this class, and the last judgment, you have Christ in the middle, and on Christ's right-hand side, you have the people who are saved. On the left, you have the people that are damned, that are sent to hell. So remember, Christ's right would be your left as a viewer. So here, if you look, we have, once again, this duality that's going to come up over and over again in Dio Rivera's work. The plant that Dio Rivera is studying, the automobile plant, is the River Rouge, R-I-V-E-R, Rouge, R-O-U-G-E. And Dio Rivera spends a couple months taking pictures and studying and drawing at the River Rouge plant in April of 1932, a couple months. And this is the largest industrial complex of its day. It is not only the source of where a lot of the raw materials are coming from all over the Midwest being shipped in on the Great Lakes, but a lot of the metals being transformed into the modern machines, the factories of steel, the factories of cement, glass, electrical power. And not only are these factories working to make automobiles, but they're also working on the creation of ships and tractors and the airplanes. The airplane manufacturing. And so if you look at this western wall, on the right-hand side, which would be, look at your left-hand side, which would be the right-hand side of God or Jesus, you will see the creation of the airplane for purposes of travel. And you will also see in that kind of rectangular area right above that arched window, right above that arched area on the left, you will see a dove. This is on the right-hand side of God, or your left. Sorry if that's confusing. But this is a symbol of peace. This is a symbol of the benefits of industry, how the creation of airlines could be used for purposes such as travel. On your right-hand side, above that arched window, you will see a hawk, the symbol of warfare. This is, of course, if you were God in the center on God's left-hand side. And above that, you see the creation of airlines for negative purposes, for insidious purposes, the creation of airlines for warfare. So Dio Rivera is going to be playing with this idea throughout the mural cycle. If you want to get an idea of what the River Rouge plant looked like, I would highly recommend you go to Google right now and Google Charles Sheeler, S-H-E-E-L-E-R, Charles Sheeler's painting American Landscape, which is at MoMA, and it is a painting that is of the River Rouge plant. So go and look at that plant, or go look at that painting, and you get an idea of what Dio Rivera is also looking at. On the east wall, slide number 32. Here we have the origins of human life. In that central area, you can see that infant, that little baby who's kind of wrapped up in a bulb, as if it were a bulb of a plant cradled in the earth. And then above that baby, you can see two women. There's two women are holding both fruit and vegetables which are native to Michigan. And they are symbols of abundance, the fecundity of the world. Now, we've talked a lot in this class when we did the whole unit on women artists, the idea of women are represent nature, whereas man represents culture. And Dio Rivera is kind of continuing with these tropes, continuing with these stereotypes. There is, right, on this eastern wall, the female form wrapped nude, right? We can admire the female form, that male gaze once again, and she is connected to nature. Kind of those rounded forms of the apples and the fruit are reflected in her bodily forms. And then you look on the west wall, if you go back to slide number 31, and throughout the rest of the mural, you will see the male form, who is of course dressed and who is responsible for the creation of culture and technology and advancement of different mechanical and scientific ideas. So Dio Rivera is is as much of a progressive in many ways as he is. He's still falling back into these kind of very sexist tropes of how the difference between how men and women are depicted. What is nice as a Michigander is seeing all of our, native fruits and vegetables depicted here. Then if we go to slide number 33, what we're going to start talking about here are the themes of the major focus of the mural cycle. And what he's doing here is he's showing the manufacture of the Ford V8. And on the south wall right here, we have the exterior, the creation of the exterior of the cars. And if you go down to slide number 36, this is the depiction of the interior of the V8 engine. So everything that goes on both interior, from the interior point of view, and in slide 33 from the exterior point of view. Let's go back to 33. On the top, you will see two people and then a bunch of hands, two nudes and then a bunch of hands. And then if you go to 36, we're going to jump back and forth, you will see two other people and then a bunch of hands. Those four people are supposed to be representations of the four races. In slide number 36, you have on the right the black race. On the left, you have the Native American or the red race. I know these are kind of highly controversial terms right now. In slide 33, on the left, you have the white race. On the right, you have the Asian race. And then you have all those hands that are emerging from the ground. Remember, Dio Rivera is a product of his time. And Dio Rivera gets his start working for Jose Vasconcelos, who publishes a book called La Raza Cósmica, right? The cosmic race, this idea that the mestizo, this fifth race, is kind of predestined to become the greatest of the races. But what Dio Rivera is doing is kind of controversial as this is in today's society. He's trying to show the collaboration of all four sections of society. And if you look closely at the men that are represented, go back to 33, look in detail at panel number 34, look in detail at 36 again, and then 37. Look at all that kind of multi-ethnic workforce is coming together. You see it very clearly in slide 37, to come together for this greater cause of creating this industrial greatness. And this is very much part of Dio Rivera's aesthetic. We don't see it just in Detroit, but we also have seen it in the National Palace. And this, go back to slide number 33, this creation of the industrial plant mirrors in many ways the creation of all different building campaigns since the dawn of humankind, right? When we go back to Europe, the creation of the cathedrals, the medieval cathedrals, the Romanesque and the Gothic cathedrals, and then what does Monet do? He paints the cathedrals. Then we have in the early teens and 20s in the United States, the construction of the skyscrapers. And then what does George O'Keeffe do in the 1920s? She paints the skyscrapers. Then you have in the 19-teens, Henry Ford and these big industrial magnates creating these power plants and industrial plants. And what do we have in the 1930s? You have Dio Rivera and Charles Sheeler painting these power plants. So it just kind of shows you how the industrial power plant here is kind of a modern cathedral. And here, as we see the exterior of the creation, I want you to go down to number 34, slide number 34. You can see some of the things going on in the creation of this. In the middle there, see all the men working in the middle? Look in the background. What you see is a tour group observing the workers. Henry Ford was very fond of having people come in, observe, see how the automobile industry was creating these cars for mass production. And you see on the bottom right, there's a painting of Edsel Ford himself. His portrait appears with the man William Valentiner, who was the director of the Detroit Institute of Arts, those two men there. And then look above them. In the middle there, see all the men working in the middle? Look in the background. What you see is a tour group observing the workers. Henry Ford was very fond of having people come in, observe, see how the automobile industry was creating these cars for mass production. And you see on the bottom right, there's a painting of Edsel Ford himself. His portrait appears with the man William Valentiner, who was the director of the Detroit Institute of Arts, those two men there. And then look above them. You can see a group on the very top right of women workers, and what they're doing there is they're sewing the upholstery used for the interior of cars. So women aren't completely relegated to symbols of culture and procreation and fecundity, but they're also used here to show that they were also involved in the creation of the automobile. Something that one of the criticisms of this mural cycle is that you don't see the results of the Great Depression here. It looks as if all these workers are happily working in harmony. But in fact, by 1932, when Dio Rivera is doing this, the workforce at Ford's plants is only 1/5 of what it had been in 1929. There has been because of the impacts of the Great Depression, massive labor demonstration, widespread unemployment, lots of hunger strikes even, racial disputes, racism, but yet here Dio Rivera portrays a certain harmony. And we'll end the audio recording here on that note of harmony, despite the fact that the reality of Detroit in the 1930s wasn't the most harmonious.